Common sense. The great Eldersky, Don Lorenzo. Welcome to the program. No Victocrats allowed because we've got a country to save. So let's get her teed up!
You want to play rock? Say hello to my little friend. What the hell's going on out here? Ooh, that's a bingo.
888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. J.K. Rowling has apologized for spreading fake news about Donald Trump and a disabled boy. Eric Trump told Sean Hannity, I want somebody to start fighting for my dad. We're going to be talking to Don Brown, author of a book called The Last Fighter Pilot, true story about the final combat mission of World War II. But first, I want to address something that happened yesterday. Got this voice message.
Hey, Larry, you marble mouth motherfucker. Every time I hear you, yesterday it happened to be on that Carson Tucker show. It doesn't matter, his show and your show, it's always the same. You're a one-trick pony. You're that coon that they call whenever they want black people to talk bad about black people. That's you. You're a destroying monkey.
Aside from the fact that he got Tucker Carlson's name wrong, let me address, I guess, the merits of his argument. His argument is that I am undermining the future, the prospects of black people. I guess that's what his argument is. And it reminds me of a conversation I had when I took my dad to get his haircut. My dad got his haircut not too far from the house, and I would pick him up and take him. And the first time I took him there were a handful of people there who knew who I was and was not happy with my show. So I essentially had a press conference with about 5 or 6 barbers. And they were less angry about racism and more angry about what they perceived to be income inequality. That's what they were mad about. They felt that because of slavery, because of Jim Crow, black people were back to the bus, and therefore when the shackles were taken off, we were by definition handicapped, and we never have caught up, and that's what bothered them. And I said, let me tell you something. Life isn't fair. Sorry. If I could make it fair, I would. There's only one way to deal with inequality. One way. And that's hard work. Or you can marry it if you get lucky. You can inherit it. Sounds to me like you've already struck out on that one. You could find it maybe under a cabbage patch. You could win it in the lottery. You could steal it. And if you steal it from me, I live in a nice area, armed patrol, burglar alarm, and I have a firearm strategically placed in every area of my home. So if somebody comes into my house, we're going to have a discussion. So the only option you have is to bust your butt and work hard and get it. And I don't know of any formula where feeling sorry for yourself and thinking like you're a victim makes that route easier. I don't. If hard work is about persistence and about believing that there'll be a payoff for your work, how it is thinking of yourself as wronged and as a victim and angry about other people, how that makes your load easier is beyond me. So you have a couple of choices. You can sit around, you can bitch, moan, and whine, or you can invest in yourself, improve your skills, live below your means, keep your head down, invest, and 20, 30 years, if you work hard enough, put in enough hours, if your goal is to be wealthy, you will be wealthy, if that's your goal. But if that isn't your goal isn't to improve your situation, don't sit around and whine about what you don't have. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And if there's a formula other than hard work, steadily, persistently applied over a long period of time, I would have found it. That brings me to the Procter & Gamble commercial, which I'm going to play for you in a second. It reminds me, this commercial I'm going to play for you, of the Nike ad that ran about 21 years ago, mid-90s, when Tiger Woods made his debut. Some of you might remember the ad. shows a number of clips of Tiger Woods, young Tiger Woods, winning this amateur tournament and that amateur tournament, and it has a bunch of graphics about all the things he's done. And at the end of this commercial, the graphic says, "But there are places, golf courses in America, where I can't play because of my race." We contacted Nike. I know other people did as well. And we said, "Can you please give us a list of the golf courses where Tiger Woods can't play?" And they had nothing, and they admitted that he could play anywhere he wanted. That's the guy who went to Stanford, raised by his father, concentrated on golf, plenty of advantages, and now because he is a successful golfer, he's Malcolm X. Really? So here is the Procter & Gamble commercial. It's about the talk. And it shows a bunch of a black child and a black parent in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s all having the talk. And the message is that blacks are victims. They were victims then. We're victims now. We're always going to be victims. Oh, and by the way, blacks are victims. Here is Procter & Gamble ad called The Talk.
Who said that?
The lady at the store.
That is not a compliment.
Listen, it's an ugly, nasty word, and you are going to hear it. Nothing I can do about that. But you are not going to let that word hurt you. You hear me? There are some people who think you don't deserve the same privileges just because of what you look like. It's not fair. It's not. Remember, you can do anything they can. The difference is you gotta work twice as hard and be twice as smart.
Come straight home after practice. Is that your idea? Oh, guess I stopped it. How's your review?
We're good.
You good?
Yeah,
You see?
we're good.
Okay. Good. Now, when you get pulled over,
I'm a good driver.
baby,
Don't worry.
this is not about you getting a ticket. This is about you not coming home.
I'm gonna be okay. Right? Okay.
It's not fair. But you keep showing up.
You are not pretty for a black girl. You are beautiful, period. Okay? Don't ever forget that.
So that's the Procter & Gamble new ad for crying out loud. Couple things. You can be anything you want. You have to work twice as hard and be twice as smart. Really? Let's assume your goal is to become wealthy. And one of the ways of doing that, of course, is to start your own business. Average business person works 50, 60 hours a week. So you mean in order to be successful, if you're black, you have to work 120 hours a week? Have to have an IQ of 240 points? Really? And when you get pulled over, as if white parents don't have the same conversation about what happens when you get pulled over by a cop. You are beautiful. Don't ever forget that. Why is it that blacks have higher self-esteem than whites, higher self-esteem than Asians? The issue is not whether or not black people have high self-esteem. Blacks have high self-esteem. The issue is, are we producing people who can compete, who have skills that are of value in the 21st century? That's the issue. And the breakdown of the family, again, is far and away the biggest problem in America. But I'm the C word for simply suggesting that. Sir, I feel for you. I really do. I'm Larry Elder. Please don't leave town.
Larry Elder, all true, all devastating.
Hey, good afternoon, Larry. My name is Matt from Fort Worth, Texas. It's a privilege to be on your show. You're a great American. You always tell the truth. I wonder if it would motivate the politicians in Washington, D.C. to repeal and replace Obamacare if Trump came out one day and put all of them on the Affordable Care Act. Yes, put them and their families, their children and their grandchildren on the Affordable Care Act. Yeah, let's bend them over and see if it motivates them to get rid of that disaster.
Holy frijoles and guacamole.
888-971-SAGE. Remember Stephen Miller got into a very heated exchange with CNN's Jim Acosta over the new immigration approach from Donald Trump. We'll have that for you in a few minutes. Now, 35 years after President Reagan crushed the Air Traffic Controllers Union for calling an illegal strike, big labor and big airlines have their eyes on recapturing the air traffic control system. Their unwitting allies, Republicans on Capitol Hill, who want to spin off the air traffic control into a federally funded independent nonprofit corporation, a process they call privatization, but really is that in name only. You see, the big airlines and unions stand to gain $20 billion in giveaway, and their plans hands over decisions about infrastructure, funding, taxes, fees, and consumer complaints to a board dominated by the commercial airlines. Big unions stand to gain, too, and are lobbying for this new plan. Now, I'm in favor of legalization, but I want it to be true legalization. And this plan will raise ticket prices, make travel less safe. Supporters of the plan say it will reduce flight times and delays, but that simply isn't true. The DOT data shows that our air traffic control system is not the primary cause of airline flight delays. Airline scheduling practices are, and this proposal gives more power to the big airlines. Help stop this privatization in name only plan. Go to aviationacrossamerica.org to learn more. That's aviationamerica.org, or go to larryelder.com and look for the Aviation Across America banner. Aviationacrossamerica.org. That's aviationacrossamerica.org. So much to get into. Dinesh D'Souza had a very interesting exchange with a student about global warming. We're going to have that for you later on in the program. But first, Stephen Miller is the young man who, as you know, began calling our show when he was a student at Santa Monica High. He's now one of Donald Trump's aides. And he had a very interesting and feisty exchange with CNN's Jim Acosta over the immigration bill.
Law. The foreign-born population in the United States today, Jim,
talking about how border crossings.
Do you really? I want to be serious, Jim. Do you really at CNN not know the difference between green card policy and illegal immigration?
Sir,
are you really don't know that?
Cuban immigrant. He came to this country in 1962, right before the Cuban Missile Crisis, and obtained a green card. Yes, people who immigrate to this country can eventually. People who
Jim, it's a factual question, Jim. Jim, as a factual question.
Do obtain a green card at some point. They do it through a lot of hard work, and yes, they may learn English as a second language later on in life.
So, but
this whole notion of, well, they could learn, they have to learn English before they get to the United States. Are we just going to bring in people from Great Britain and Australia?
Jim, I have to honestly say, I am shocked at your statement that you think that only people from Great Britain and Australia would know English. It reveals your cosmopolitan bias to a shocking degree that in your mind, no, this is an amazing moment. This is an amazing moment that you think only people from Great Britain or Australia would speak English is so insulting to millions of hardworking immigrants who do speak English from all over the world. Jim, have you honestly never met an immigrant from another country who speaks English outside of Great Britain and Australia? Is that your personal experience?
Of course there are people who come.
But that's not what you said, and it shows your cosmopolitan bias. And I just want to say,
it sounds like you're trying to engineer the racial and ethnic flow of people into this country.
Jim, that is one of the most outrageous, insulting, ignorant, and foolish things you've ever said, and for you that's still a really... The notion that you think that this is a racist bill is so wrong and so insulting. Jim, the reality is that the foreign-born population...
Saying it, you may hear him. Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! The heavyweight champion is taking the mandatory 8 count, and Foreman is as poised as can be.
And it has no...
The American community now, you brought it up again. You said you wanted to have a conversation and not target. Is it going to be a target?
This is what we want to do.
The African American community, are you going to target? I'm not trying to be funny.
Right, and I know what you're saying. What you're saying is 100% correct. We want to help unemployed African Americans in this country, and unemployed workers of all backgrounds get jobs. And insinuations like Jim made, trying to ascribe nefarious motives to a compassionate immigration measure designed to help newcomers and current arrivals alike, is wrong. And this is a positive, optimistic proposal that says 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, we want to have an immigration system that takes care of the people who are coming here and the people who are already living here by having standards, by having a real clear requirement that you be able to support yourself financially, by making sure that employers can pay a living wage. That's the right policy for our country, and it's the President's commitment to taking care of American workers. I apologize, Jim, if things got heated, but you did make some pretty rough insinuations. So thank you, and I'll hand it over to Sarah.
Two for you. First, following up on Noah's question regarding the President's talked a lot about immigration reform that has been held up in the past. He has the power today to take personal action on this by changing the way his Trump properties, Mar-a-Lago and others, bring in unskilled foreign workers, displacing, as you talked about, the large numbers of Americans who are looking for work in these states. So is the President planning on taking that action? And secondly, does this signal that the White House does not believe that any sort of comprehensive action on immigration is possible with this Congress, that immigration needs to be tackled in a piecemeal fashion going forward?
Well, again, just as a technical matter, you're talking about non-immigrant guest worker visas, and this legislation deals with green cards, i.e. permanent immigration. So they're two totally separate categories. But I'll just refer everyone here today back to the President's comments during the primary when this was raised in a debate, and he said, my job as a businessman is to follow the laws of the United States. And my job as President is to create an immigration system that works for American workers. And that's one of the reasons why I think Americans so deeply admire President Trump, is because they see every day he's not working for himself. He's said over and over again, I've been very successful. I've had a great life. Now I'm here to work for the American people. But for any immigration system to be functional and to work, it has to be uniform across the board.
The changes that Trump wants in immigration is to have legal immigration, reduce it by 50%, give preference to highly skilled English speakers, and to stop extended families getting green cards.
On this, and we just look at the polling data in many key battleground states across the country, that over time you're going to see massive public push for this kind of legislation, because immigration affects every aspect of our lives. It affects our schools, our hospitals, our working conditions, our labor market, our tax base, our communities, and it's a deeply personal issue for Americans. And so you're going to see massive public support for this. And ultimately, members of Congress will have a choice to make. They can either vote with the interests of U.S. citizens and U.S. workers, or they can vote against their interests, and whatever happens as a result of that, I think, would be somewhat predictable.
The New York Times says only a fifth of immigrants coming to the country are being admitted based on job-based factors. New York Times said that. I'm Larry Elder. More on this when we come back. Don't leave town.
Call in now and join the conversation. 888-971-SAGE. That's 888-971-7243. El Dorado's Let Larry Know What's on Your Mind.
Hey Larry, this is Frank in Hayward. I think Trump's comments about Jeff Sessions, how he wouldn't have had him as Attorney General if he'd known he was going to recuse himself, were reprehensible. Sessions went through a lot after he was nominated, and his name dragged through the mud. And this is how Trump repays him, because he had the honorable position of recusing himself where there was a bias. And I hate to say it, he can learn a lot from Obama, who actually had class and wished John McCain well after he was diagnosed with cancer, unlike some people. Thank you.
Hi, Larry. This is Dominic. I'm calling from Dallas, Texas. I just heard your lead-in to your show this evening, and I cannot believe that less than 40% of Americans approve of what President Trump is doing. I didn't always have a lot of confidence in my fellow Americans, but this really convinces me that there are more stupid people out there than one could ever imagine.
888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. That's right. In the new Rasmussen poll, the one that normally has Trump higher than the other polls, has him under 40% for the first time. Now, the good news is it's early. Bill Clinton had similar numbers. And 17 months into his term, he dumped his chief of staff. We talked about this yesterday, brought in a new guy in order to impose discipline. Because according to the Washington Post, anybody who walked down the hall could go into the Oval Office and have a meeting with Bill Clinton. Same kind of criticism that we're hearing about President Trump. So calm down, relax. Bill Clinton, of course, rode to a re-election, and most people now consider his presidency to have been successful. And we're going to look back and say the same thing about President Donald Trump. Now, we're in our third day of my campaign to help our friends at Food for the Poor, to help starving children in drought-stricken Haiti. Angel Aloma, whom I've met when I was in Guatemala, is the executive director of Food for the Poor. He's an amazing guy, full of energy, full of compassion, full of concern. He just came back from Haiti, where he had an especially touching encounter.
You know, I went into a little shack. There is a child eating a little bowl of rice. His 7-year-old brother, the child eating was 4. The 7-year-old brother is standing there looking very sad. I asked him in Creole, why aren't you eating? And he said, today it's not my turn to eat. If we can only imagine the pain of a parent having to tell their child, I can't feed you today, maybe tomorrow, or a grandparent, as is the case many times, it has to be horrendous. That seems like something that should just not be happening.
Now, you can help us help Food for the Poor right now. Just $50 will give one starving child in Haiti food for a year, water for life, or your one-time gift of $100 will give the same blessing to 2 needy children. Just call toll-free 855-918-4673. That's 855-918-HOPE. Or you can go to LarryElder.com and click on the Food for the Poor banner. 855-918-HOPE, 855-918-4673. We're going to return to Stephen Miller's very entertaining press conference where he is talking to a New York Times reporter about low-skilled workers. And the New York Times reporter says to Stephen Miller, what is your empirical data for supporting your thesis that illegal aliens who are unskilled pose a threat to unskilled workers in America? And, of course, Miller was ready. We're going to have that for you in just a few minutes. 888-971-SAGE. But first, Dominic in Dallas, Texas. Dominic, you're on the Larry Elder Show. Thank you very much for calling. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure to speak to you. It's very nice to hear you here in Dallas. If you would indulge me, 3 quick comments. Number 1, I am so sorry to have to listen to that ridiculous comment that gentleman made. I'm sorry that you had to hear it, and I'm even sorrier for him that he's that low that he would say something like that. Number 2, if it were not for an immigrant, I wouldn't be on the phone with you. My dad came to this country many years ago from Italy. He worked very hard. He built a business, unlike what Obama would tell him. He paid people. He paid taxes. He helped people to get away from the socialist country that he came from. And it kind of offends me when I hear these liberals saying what they say about immigration. Number 1, immigration is intended to benefit the country into which immigrants come. It is not a right of the immigrant to come in, do what they want, get what they want, and then have these liberals make it sound as if it's a right for them to be here. It is not a right. It's a privilege. It's an honor. Just like talking to you is an honor, it's an honor for an immigrant to come to this country. And I'm fed up with the libs.
Dominic, beautifully said. Thank you so much for calling. That was just wonderful. And I bet when your father came here, there was no bilingual course in Italian for him to adjust to America, the way we have bilingual courses for people from Mexico here in California. And by the way, we had a movement to get rid of the bilingual education courses in California because it turned out the kids were not making a transition, and the education establishment fought it. They lost. Turns out the kids made the transition. They were dead wrong.
Hey, Larry. I don't know a whole lot about healthcare, admittedly, but why can't the socialist state that want single payer ultimately and want government healthcare, why can't they all pull together and those states can have single payer, and then the states that want free competition, they get free competition, and then the residents and the citizens vote with their feet. And if they want government health care, they go to their, liberal state. And if they want free competition. They go to the free states. All right. Take care.
888-971-SHE. Well, that, of course, is the whole point behind the concept of federalism. We have 50 states. Each state would do things differently, and we would learn from the states that did things well and learn from the states that did things poorly. That's the whole point. And so, yes, we talked with the head of the House Budget Committee, Congresswoman Diane Black from Tennessee. And she talked about TennCare being the first state that had single payer, and it practically bankrupted the state. And we played you that cut from Jonathan Gruber, who designed Romney Care, bragging that the reason Romney Care works is that, quote, some smart people in Massachusetts have been able to figure out a way of ripping off the government to the tune of about $400 million, close quote, he said. So we learn from those two examples. Maine tried it too. Hasn't worked. You know why? Get real close to the phone, people on the left, because I'm going to say this very, very slowly because the great El Dursby speaks quickly, and I know sometimes it's difficult for some of you. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Everything costs. And the best way of getting the cost of something down is to increase the number of competitors who are producing that good or that service. That's the best way to increase the quality, the accessibility, and to lower the price. If there's another way of doing it, tell me what it is. Now, Stephen Miller, in my opinion, was brilliant. And isn't it interesting that he was asked by this reporter, what is your empirical data for the idea that unskilled illegal aliens threaten the jobs and lower the wages of unskilled people living in this country? What is your empirical data? Stephen Miller was asked. Wrong person to ask. But isn't it interesting that you ask for your empirical data? In other words, prove that it will work. Prove that it will have the effect you say it will have. But this is never asked about the proponents of $15 minimum wage, the fight for 15. Prove to us that a $15 minimum wage will not hurt jobs. Has anybody ever asked that of these people? Has anybody ever asked that of Pelosi? Anybody ever asked that of these people?
Let's go to Glenn.
Two quick questions. First of all, let's have some statistics. There have been a lot of studies out there that don't show a correlation between low-skilled immigration and the loss of jobs for native workers. Cite for me, if you could, one or two studies with specific numbers that prove the correlation between those two things, because your entire policy is based on that. And secondly, I have sources that told me about a month ago that you guys have sort of elbowed infrastructure out of the way to get immigration on the legislative street. Tell me why this is more important than infrastructure.
Well, your latter statement isn't true. I think the most recent study I would point to is the study from George Borjas that he just did about the Mariel boat lift. And he went back and re-examined and opened up the old data and talked about how it actually did reduce wages for workers who were living there at the time. And Borjas has, of course, done enormous amounts of research on this, as has the Peter Kirsanow on the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, as has Steve Camarada at the Center for Immigration Studies, and so on and so on. And the recent study said that as much as $300 billion a year may be lost as a result of our current immigration system in terms of folks drawing more public benefits than they're paying in. But let's also use common sense here, folks. At the end of the day, why do special interests want to bring in more low-skilled workers, and why historically?
Common sense. I'm asking for specific.
Well, I think it's very clear, Glenn, that you're not asking for common sense. But if I could just answer your question, I named the studies, Glenn. Glenn, I named the studies. I asked you for a statistic. Can you tell me how many? Maybe we'll make a carve-out in the bill that says the New York Times can hire all the low-skilled, less-paid workers they want from other countries, and see how you feel then about low-wage substitution. This is a reality that's happening in our country. You know, maybe it's time we had compassion, Glenn, for American workers. President Trump has met with American workers who've been replaced by foreign workers, and ask them how this has affected their lives. Look at, I just told you.
Low-skilled jobs that Americans might otherwise have. What?
If you look first of all, if you look at the premise, Glenn, of bringing in low-skilled labor, it's based on the idea that there's a labor shortage for lower-skilled jobs. There isn't. The number of people living in the United States in the working ages who aren't working today is at a record high. 1 in 4 Americans, or almost 1 in 4 Americans between the ages of 25 and 54 aren't even employed. For African American workers, their labor force participation rate, who don't have a high school diploma, I guess African American males without a high school diploma, has plummeted some 40 percentage points since the mass wave of unskilled migration began. The reality is that if you just use common sense, and yes, I will use common sense, the reason why some companies want to bring in more unskilled labor is because they know that it drives down wages and reduces labor costs. Our question as a government is, to whom is our duty? Our duty is to U.S. citizens and U.S. workers to promote rising wages for them. If low-skilled immigration was an unalloyed good for the economy, then why have we been growing at 1.5% for the last 17 years at a time of unprecedented new low-wage arrivals? The facts speak for themselves. At some point, we're accountable to reality. On the other hand, like I said, you have ultra-high-skilled workers who are at the back of the line, which makes no sense in the year 2017. Neil, let me go to you.
And again, people on the left claim that they really care about minorities. This reporter asked, what's your data for your proposition that unskilled illegal aliens pose threats to the jobs and the wages of Americans who are unskilled living here? He just now gave him several sources. He should have mentioned the letter that Coretta Scott King wrote in 1991 urging Senator Orrin Hatch not to repeal sanctions on employers of illegal aliens. Quote, we are concerned that your proposed remedy will cause another problem, the revival of pre-1986 discrimination against black and brown U.S. documented workers in favor of cheap labor, the undocumented workers. This would undoubtedly exacerbate an already severe economic crisis in communities where there are large numbers of new immigrants, close quote. Coretta Scott King. Not a neocon, not a Republican, not a racist. I'm Larry Elder.
Hey, Larry. Fly in the swamp! Fly in the swamp!
The big Republican win in November shocked the media elites and the political elites in both parties. It was a wake-up call. And now the fight to make America great again is upon us. President Trump's done a lot to cut the red tape and the burdens that have been strangling our businesses for the past 8 years. But much-needed corporate tax cuts can put our companies and workers on an even playing field. The Dems and the media are counting on us to blow this chance, and AARP, which helped get Obamacare passed, has, of course, been silent. AMAC, on the other hand, stands with President Trump on these two crucial issues, and you can take a stand by joining. If you're over 50, you'll receive a 5-year membership for only $59. AMAC delivers the very best benefits and discounts on everything from health insurance to hotels to restaurants. So go to my website, LarryElder.com, look for the banner ad, or call 888-262-2006, 888-262-2006. LarryElder.com, look for the banner ad, or call 888-262-2006. That's 888-262-2006. Coming up, we're going to be talking to the author of a book about the last combat mission in World War II. And Dinesh D'Souza had a very interesting exchange with a gentleman who asked him about climate change. Why don't we just err on the side of spending all this money to transition from fossil fuels to renewables, because it's just good soup. Now, I mentioned earlier the letter that Coretta Scott King wrote in 1991 to Orrin Hatch. Congress was thinking about loosening sanctions against employers who hired illegal aliens. And she joined 8 other CEOs of leading black organizations and coalitions lobbying on behalf of minority voters who they say would be hurt by illegal immigration. Quote, we are concerned, Senator Hatch, that your proposed remedy will cause another problem, the revival of the pre-1986 discrimination against black and brown U.S. and documented workers in favor of cheap labor and undocumented workers. This would undoubtedly exacerbate an already severe economic crisis in communities where there are large numbers of new immigrants, close quote. Now, again, that letter was written by Coretta Scott King, and as a result, the reaction has been, I mean, what are you going to say? And can we take a stroll down memory lane just a little bit?
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country.
1995.
The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers.
We have to listen to the concerns that working people, our forgotten working people, have over
time, day or night, leave a message. Try and keep your message under 60 seconds. I want to go back to Stephen Miller. So proud of Stephen Miller. And when I hear him speak, I get a thrill up my leg. He was having a feisty exchange with CNN's Jim Acosta about Donald Trump's plan to curtail legal immigration, and then was asked by a New York Times reporter, what is your empirical data for your assertion that illegal aliens pose a threat economically to unskilled workers in America? Don't you love it when the left asks for empirical data? What's your empirical data for your assertion that Obamacare will give us better health care outcomes than what we had before Obamacare? What's your empirical data for your assertion that raising the minimum wage will create more jobs rather than destroying them? What's your empirical data for your assertion that making it mandatory that you go to a government school will improve the educational outcomes of kids who have choices to not go to that government school? Does anybody ever ask those kinds of questions? You remember when we had the so-called meathead tax here in California, taxing cigarettes and other tobacco products to raise money for childhood development? They raised hundreds of millions of dollars. What is your empirical data for the idea that raising this money improved childhood development outcomes? Does anybody even ask that? But Stephen Miller was asked that.
All right, let's go to Glenn.
Two quick questions. First of all, let's have some statistics. There have been a lot of studies out there that don't show a correlation between low-skilled immigration and the loss of jobs for native workers. Cite for me, if you could, one or two studies with specific numbers that prove the correlation between those two things, because you're entirely...
And Stephen Miller went on to cite George Borjas. We've done that on the show here. He's probably done more work on the impact of legal and illegal immigration than any other economist. And he said there's no question that illegal alien workers pose a threat to the jobs and puts downward pressure on wages of unskilled workers living in the inner city, black and brown workers. But isn't it fascinating? Now we want data. Well, how about this? How about the fact that Obama and Bill Clinton and Harry Reid all at one time made the same arguments, economic arguments about the damage done to the country through illegal immigration? And in some cases, they even use the term illegal aliens. Can we take a stroll down memory lane? Let's go to the videotape.
Those who enter the country illegally and those who employ them disrespect the rule of law, and they are showing disregard for those who are following the law.
2005.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers.
We have to listen to the concerns that working people, our forgotten working people, have over the record pace of immigration and its impact on their jobs, wages, housing, schools, tax bills, and general living conditions. These are valid concerns expressed by decent and patriotic citizens from all backgrounds, all over.
If making it easy to be an illegal alien isn't enough, how about offering a reward for being an illegal immigrant? No
1993
would do that.
1993.
Right?
In approaching immigration reform, I believe we must enact tough, practical reforms that ensure and promote the legal and orderly entry of immigrants into our country.
2005.
We will turn off the jobs and benefits magnet. We will ensure that E-Verify is used to the fullest extent possible under existing law, and we will work with Congress to strengthen and expand its use across the country.
We all agree on the need to better secure the border and to punish employers who choose to hire illegal immigrants.
That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before.
Zero tolerance for criminal aliens. Zero. Moving forward, we will issue detainers for illegal immigrants who are arrested for any crime whatsoever, and they will be placed into immediate removal proceedings.
We will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes, to better identify illegal aliens in the workplace as recommended by the commission headed by former Congresswoman Barbara Jordan.
I continue to believe that we need stronger enforcement on the border and at the workplace. That means a workable, mandatory system that employers must use to verify the legality of their workers.
If you break our laws by entering this country without permission and give birth to a child, we reward that child with U.S. citizenship and guarantee of full access to all public and social services this society provides. And that's a lot of services. Is it any wonder that 2/3 of the babies born at taxpayer expense at county-run hospitals in Los Angeles are born to illegal alien mothers?
So, that's why we need to start by giving agencies charged with border security new technology, new facilities, and more people to stop, process, and deport illegal immigrants.
By cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens.
Our enforcement priorities will include removing criminals, gang members, security threats, visa overstays, public charges, that is, those relying on public welfare or straining the safety net, along with millions of recent illegal arrivals.
Right now, we've got millions of illegal immigrants who live and work here without knowing their identity or background.
But we are also a nation of laws. It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years, and we must do more to stop.
We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked, and circumventing the line of people who are waiting patiently, diligently, and lawfully to become immigrants in this country.
Now, anybody that makes those arguments is a xenophobe, is a bigot, is anti-immigrant. These people are absolutely shameless. And one more time, Coretta Scott King sent a letter to Jeff Sessions in 1991 when Congress was thinking about repealing and watering down sanctions on employers who hire illegal aliens. She signed a letter along with 8 CEOs of other black organizations. Quote, "We are concerned, Senator Hatch, that your proposed remedy will cause another problem. Undocumented workers, cheap labor, would, quote, undoubtedly exacerbate an already severe economic crisis in communities where there are large numbers of new immigrants," end of quote. Interesting how they rarely quote her. Does that make her a racist, a bigot? The book is called The Last Fighter Pilot. It's about the last combat mission of World War II. We're going to talk about that when we come back. 888-971-SAGE. And Dinesh D'Souza handled a very interesting question on global warming with skill and dexterity. I'm Larry Elder. Don't leave town.
You're listening to The Larry Elder Show.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. The Japanese began the war from the air at Pearl Harbor. They have been repaid many-fold, and the end is not yet. With this bomb, we have now added a new and revolutionary increase in destruction to supplement the growing power of our armed forces. In their present form, these bombs are now in production, and even more powerful forms are in development. It is an atomic bomb. It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. The force from which the sun draws its power has been loosed against those who brought war to the Far East. We have spent more than $2 billion on the greatest scientific gamble in history, and we have won. But the greatest marvel is not the size of the enterprise, its secrecy, or its cost, but the achievement of scientific brains in making it work.
That was President Harry Truman talking about the Manhattan Project and the Hiroshima and the Nagasaki bomb. And many people assume that when the second bomb fell, that was the end of the war. There's a book called The Last Fighter Pilot, the true story of the final combat mission of World War II. Please welcome to the program the author, co-author, Don Brown. Don, thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Larry, thanks for having me. A big fan of yours. Very honored to be here and grateful to you and grateful for the opportunity to get this story out. Thank you so much.
Well, I think a lot of Americans assumed that after the second bomb fell, Don, that was it.
That's exactly right. The second bomb fell on August 9th, 1945 on Nagasaki. We'd already hit them once on August 6th. And President Truman, by the way, that's one of the most poignant and most powerful presidential speeches ever that you just played. What a monumental moment. But he gave them, he pulled the bombing off. We've been bombing the Japanese homeland since November of 44 from Mariana Islands with B-29s, flying constantly for a period of about 9 months. So we've been bombing them. After Nagasaki was bombed, President Truman pulled the bombing off to give them a chance to surrender. The Japanese simply did not surrender. What was not known at the time, Larry, is that there was a great internal battle going on inside Japan between the Japanese military as to whether they should surrender or not. And on this final mission, of which the book talks about partially, flown on the 14th of August, 1945, even that morning, these two pilots, these two young Jewish kids, really, 19 and 21 years old, and took off on a final mission when the president reordered the bombing to start. Even as they took off for that final mission, there was an attempted coup against the emperor in Tokyo that was going on that morning because there were a number of mid-level Japanese officers that wanted to prevent the surrender. They wanted to force us to invade. We had an invasion plan drawn up, just like we had in Europe. It was called Operation Downfall, and the military estimates are that it would have cost us another 1 million men, and we had to invade. And we'd already lost 400,000 up to that point. But if we had to invade the Japanese homeland at a time, even after Europe had fallen, it would have been a much greater catastrophe than even it was.
Don Brown is my guest, co-author of the book The Last Fighter Pilot, the true story of the final combat mission of World War II. Don, my father was a World War II vet. He served on the island of Guam. He was a staff sergeant. And so this whole period fascinates me, and this part of the war fascinates me. Don, explain this to me. I understand why the Japanese did not surrender on the first bombing. I guess maybe you could understand that. But the second bombing, and they still don't surrender, why?
Well, you know, Larry, the Japanese psyche at the time is a fascinating study now in history. Because, take for example, when you look at Japanese treatment of prisoners of war, and look, we had two principal adversaries, of course, in World War II, the Nazis and the Japanese. They were both evil. But one thing the Nazis had over the Japanese is they at least would engage in humane, treatment of prisoners of war for American, British, and French prisoners. Not so much Soviet, but for those three, they would at least follow something close to the Geneva Accords the Nazis would, but not Japanese. The Japanese, ISIS, in its brutality, had nothing on the Japanese. They would cannibalize our pilots. You know, there's a famous picture of President George Herbert Walker Bush being pulled out of the ocean and rescued by the USS Denback. He was shot down over Chichijima, about 70 miles north of Iwo Jima. There were two other Avenger pilots that went down, and those pilots and those crew members were actually cannibalized. Many of them were. And so, when you ask the question, why didn't they quit after Hiroshima? It's a great question. I'm not sure that I've got the answer, except there was a psyche involved in the Japanese national thought processes that they would die for their emperor. They would rather be killed than surrender. You saw it in their kamikaze attacks by their planes. You saw it in these Banzai attacks. Matter of fact, in the book, we documented the very end of the Marines' military operation on Hiroshima on March the 26th, 1945. We thought the island of I said Hiroshima, I meant to say Iwo Jima. We thought the island of Iwo Jima had been cleared. You know, the Marines had gone to Okinawa, and in the middle of the night, several hundred Japanese come out of the ground. They've been hiding in tunnels and attack one of our fighter squadrons or one of our fighter groups right there after we thought they were gone. They had a mentality that in some ways was very similar to what we're seeing from radical Islamists and ISIS today. And I think that's the best answer to the question. It was the religious fervor, and there were many, many, many in the military that wanted to force us to fight until the death, and I think that's the answer to the question.
Wow. Don Brown is my guest, co-author of the book, The Last Fighter Pilot, The True Story of Final Combat Mission of World War II. In our final minutes, talk to me about the unconditional surrender when the Japanese emperor finally had that radio address on August 15.
Well, at that time, these two young pilots, Jerry Yellen and Phil Schomburg, were actually executing a mission against the Tokyo airfield. They were strafing this airfield. They're over Tokyo. They pulled up into the clouds. Jerry comes out. Phil is gone, presumably shot down. They didn't even know what's happening when Yellen got back to Iwo Jima. He found out the war was over, and Phil Schomburg, 19 years old, was the last combat death of the war. And so that was a recording that actually had been made a day or so earlier. The emperor wasn't live, but it sounded like he was live, and so that once that was played, the war effectively ended. So that's how that sort of came about.
So, Don Brown, who plays Captain Jerry Yellen in the movie?
That's a good question. That's going to be a hard role to fit. We're going to have to see if we can figure that out. I will say, Larry, you may be interested. I'm very grateful the Reagan Presidential Foundation has endorsed this book, and we were at the Reagan Library last night. We'll be at the Nixon Library. Many of our friends are in Southern California Thursday night, tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, and we'll have to get the issue of who plays Captain Yellen sorted out. We got to find a role for Larry Elder in there.
I was going to say, Don, just please don't make it Samuel L. Jackson. I'm sick of him. I'm just sick of him. Please.
Look, Larry, seriously, I want to take a moment. I want to thank your father for his service. I really want to thank him for that. I want to just say one other thing. You know, Churchill said that never has so many owed so much to so few. He was talking about the Royal Air Force, of course, but today in America, as our World War II generation disappears, we in America hear Churchill's prophetic words again, because when we salute and say goodbye to these guys and they're dwindling down to virtually nothing, never have so many owed so much to so few.
Don Brown,
the
last fighter pilot, the true story of Final Combat Mission of World War II. Don, thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you, Larry. You bet, Don.
Larry Elder, my go-to guy. This is Shannon from Shelby. I was just thinking about the redistribution of wealth and how Obama and his administration sent billions and billions of dollars to Iran, and that was, in their eyes, I do believe, the redistribution of wealth and power. I remember Obama making a speech in his early presidency about how he thought there was nothing wrong with Iran trying to protect itself. So I believe wholeheartedly that he wants Iran to be the third world power, if not the greatest world power. Just a thought. I love your show. Peace.
888-971-SHGE, 888-971-7243. We're in the third day of my campaign to help our friends at Food for the Poor, to help starving children in drought-stricken Haiti. Angel Aloma is the executive director of Food for the Poor. He is a force of nature. Had a chance to meet with him when I was in Guatemala. Well, he just came back from Haiti, where he had a especially touching encounter.
You know, I went into a little shack. There was a child eating a little bowl of rice. His 7-year-old brother, the child eating was 4. The 7-year-old brother is standing there looking very sad. I asked him in Creole, why aren't you eating? And he said, today it's not my turn to eat. If we can only imagine the pain of a parent having to tell their child, I can't feed you today, maybe tomorrow, or a grandparent, as is the case many times, it has to be horrendous. That seems like something that should just not be happening.
And you can help us help Food for the Poor right now. Just $50 will give one starving child in Haiti food for a year and water for life, or your one-time gift of $100 will give the same blessing to 2 needy children. Just call toll-free 855-918-4673. That's 855-918-HOPE. Or you can go to LarryElder.com and click on the Food for the Poor banner, 855-918-4673, 855-918-HOPE. I'm going to bring you up to date on the latest in the Donald Trump collusion investigation. And also, we're going to talk about Dinesh D'Souza's comeback when he was asked about global warming. After all, isn't global warming a fact? Undisputable, undeniable? And even if it were in denial, isn't it better to have us leave a cleaner planet by getting us off fossil fuels than to continue what we're doing right now? And Dinesh D'Souza responded brilliantly. We're going to have that for you in just a few minutes. 888-971-SAG. But first, Al is in Inver Grove Heights, Minnesota. Al, you're on the Larry Elder Show. Thank you very much for calling. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks for taking my call. I love your show.
Thank you.
I wanted to speak on this Senate failing to pass the repeal and replace health care plan.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 535 elected people in Congress and the Senate, and they're allowed to have as many as 18 people per person. Extended relatives or the families that are on their staffs. You're talking upwards of 10, 20,000 people. And I've heard that the subsidy may be as high as $12,000 per person.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking $150 million a year in benefits going to these representatives, or so-called representatives.
Right.
It strikes me that they didn't fail to pass it because they couldn't. They failed to pass it because they didn't want to.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And when you say they didn't want to because they don't know what the consequences would be of their decision. Look, one more time, politicians are not brave. Politicians follow the lead of the people to the extent that they can figure out where the people want to go. And when they can't figure out where the people want to go, that's when you have a recipe for inaction. And right now, some people like certain parts of Obamacare. Some people don't like certain parts of Obamacare. You've got some Republicans who are deathly worried that if anybody is worse off, they're going to be punished at the ballot box. And you have Republican Party, with the exception of the Freedom people, who've not educated people about the superiority of free markets towards health care, the damage done by Obamacare, the damage done by regulations, the damage done by barriers to entry, the damage done by the failure of Congress to do something about the power of the AMA that's restricted the percentage of doctors who practice. There are all sorts of things that can and should have been done to educate the American people for the last 7 years about what ought to be done when and if we gain power to repeal and replace Obamacare. That was not done for a number of reasons, one of which was they had no blooming idea Donald Trump was going to win. And as a result, they were gobsmacked when they really had to start governing and they weren't ready. And also, again, there's all sorts of ideological impurities within the Republican Party. The party ought to be standing for Article 1, Section 8 that outlines 18 separate things that the federal government can do. Health care is not there. Welfare is not there. FEMA is not there. Job training is not there. On and on and on is not there. But we're so far away from that right now that debate is something that a lot of Republicans don't even want to have.
Larry will be right back. Stay tuned.
Larry, it's Jim from Arizona. I believe that the Senate and the House need to get in there and get the job done if they want to be reelected. If not, then I think that the Medicare, Medicaid should be given to them the same as it is the rest of it.
We're going to have an update on the Donald Trump collusion investigation in just a few minutes. The big Republican win in November shocked the media elites. Wake-up call. And now the fight to make America great again is upon us. President Trump's done a lot to cut the red tape. Been strangling our businesses for the past 8 years, but much-needed corporate tax cuts can put our companies and workers on an even playing field. The Dems and the media are counting on us to blow this opportunity. AARP, which helped get Obamacare passed, has, of course, been silent. AMAC, on the other hand, stands with President Trump on these two crucial issues, which is why I'm urging you to join AMAC right now. If you're over 50, you'll receive a 5-year membership for only $59. AMAC delivers the very best member benefits and discounts to its members on everything from health insurance to hotels to restaurants. So go to my website, LarryElder.com, look for the banner ad, or call 888-262-2006. That's 888-262-2006. LarryElder.com, AMAC, 888-262-2006, 888-262-2006.
My question to you is, how do you defend something like global warming, where it's really very obvious how the Democrats are doing the right thing and the majority of Republicans are not?
Let me ask you a question, if I may. To me, global warming is a little bit like theism, in the sense that it's a factual claim, right? It's a factual claim, moreover, that's not visible to our senses. If you were to tell me, for example, that there is a God and he has these characteristics, I might see it or I might not. But it's not like you telling me that there's a tree, because I can see a tree, right? You can see the tree. So if I don't see the tree, something's wrong with my eyesight, right? But if I don't see God in the way that you see him, it's not because it's not because I lack eyes. I see the same facts that you do. I just don't agree with your interpretation of evidence that is a little opaque to our senses, right? So here's global warming. My question to you is, why is it, to you, a moral issue? Either the Earth is getting hotter, or it's not. We don't feel it getting hotter, right? You're looking at one set of data, I'm looking at one set of data. Let's say we disagree over what this data means. We don't disagree about temperatures by themselves. We disagree about the cause of those temperatures and the significance of them and what we should do about them. For example, let's say you were to tell me that in the next room, the temperature is 800 degrees, right? Or let's say the temperature is 110 degrees. I have two choices. I can go in there and say, how do I change the planet to bring the temperature down from 110 to, let's say, a livable 90? Or I can say, maybe I should take off my jacket and try to adapt myself to the climate instead of trying to adapt the world to me. Which is easier? Is it easier for us to adapt to global change that is massive, has been occurring over millennia, and it's very unclear how we can address it? Or is it really worth... So what I'm getting at is, where's the moral issue here? What's moral about it?
The moral consequences of not doing anything about global warming, you know, and the people that are supposed to suffer a lot because of not dealing with global warming, especially the poor people in Africa and many places that are very affected by rising sea levels or lack of vegetation or food. But my question is, maybe they're wrong, but wouldn't you just like to bet that they're right for the, you know, don't you think it's much more beneficial? I mean, obviously it's not for the people that have oil companies, but you and many other people, wouldn't you just want to bet that they're probably right, that most of the scientific community is right about global warming, and you would like to change how we live and change resources? Like, would you just want to bet for that?
Well, look, I come from a poor country, India, right? India is trying to go from being a third world country to being a second world country. Now, what this means in terms of human welfare is we're talking about hundreds of millions of people going from starvation to basically having 1 or 2 meals a day, right? We're not talking about becoming rich. We're talking about a country climbing out of the most degrading type of poverty. India cannot do it without energy, without oil, without essentially the lifeblood of an economy. India and China, the two greatest human success stories in the world in the last 30 years, have come up by massively increasing their demands on world energy. They need it desperately. Poor Brazilians desperately need land, and they need farming, and they need logs, and they need timber, and they need paper. So these resources are not some world luxury. They're the very basis of the poorest of the poor, the wretched of the earth, climbing up in the world. So it's a complete fallacy to see the global warming debate as between oil companies and idealistic environmentalists. That locates the whole debate in the West, as if it's just some argument between Exxon and Brandeis. No, that's not where the fight is taking place. Poor countries need stuff to grow. They need food. They need fertilizer. So if you start classifying no fossil fuels, no this, no that, tax on this, tax on that, no oil, the point is you're not hurting the rich guys. I don't care about Exxon. You're actually hurting all these poor people who need this stuff to come up. That's why you'll never see big global warming demonstrations in Mumbai unless they're staged by the government. They'll never occur. Just like you never see protests against multinational corporations in Mumbai. You go try and you put up a sign that says Nike, and the next day there'll be 500 people standing in line. Why? So I'm simply trying to alert you as someone who's grown up on the other side of the world, as you apparently have, that this is actually a much more complex issue. And so it's not that I have a side in global warming. It's not my issue. It's just that when I hear these extravagant claims that have no empirical experiential support at all, I'm on my guard. That's all I'm saying.
When we come back, Wolf Blitzer says, but they've changed the statement. Donald Trump has changed the statement about the meeting. Isn't that evidence of obstruction of justice?
Hi, Larry. I think you're very good at keeping records and keeping track of things, and you come up with such interesting facts that I wish more people would know. I wish you would be able to keep a running total of all the people, all the witches and warlocks who get hired by Mueller for his takedown Trump campaign. I think that would be very interesting. Thanks so much. God bless. Bye.
I can tell you this, of the dozen or so lawyers that Mueller has hired, 6 or 7 of them made contribution to Democrats.
Hey, Larry. James Hall in Cincinnati. In light of Senator John McCain's major health issues, i.e. a cancerous brain tumor, I'm sure many Americans have given serious thought regarding Mr. McCain's ability to perform his duties as a U.S. Senator. Given the extreme importance of several current pieces of pending legislation, what are your thoughts regarding the possibility of Arizona Governor Ducey appointing an interim senator to try and resolve some of these major legislative issues? Thanks, Larry.
I think the chances are 0. Remember Strom Thurmond? What was he, 500 years old? Robert Byrd? Barbaric! How old was he? I think he was 1,000,000 years old. No, they're going to have to plow the gavel out of these guys' hands. Now, you sent a message to the media and the political elites last fall, loud and clear. You wanted new leadership that focuses on the middle class, not the political class, on your lives, not theirs. Now, the media elites didn't get the message. They've been working nonstop since Election Day to undo your vote. Their goal is clear: delegitimize your candidates and the issues you care about, and set up Democratic victories in 2018.
Yes, they may learn English as a second language later on in life. So, but this whole notion of, well, they could learn, they have to learn English before they get to the United States. Are we just going to bring in people from Great Britain and Australia?
Jim, actually, I have to honestly say, I am shocked at your statement that you think that only people from Great Britain and Australia would know English. It reveals your cosmopolitan bias to a shocking degree that in your mind, this is an amazing moment that you think only people from Great Britain or Australia would speak English is so insulting to millions of hardworking immigrants who do speak English from all over the world. Jim, have you honestly never met an immigrant from another country who speaks English outside of Great Britain and Australia? Is that your personal experience?
Of course there are people who come
But that's not what you said, and it shows your cosmopolitan bias. And I just want to say,
you're trying to engineer the racial and ethnic flow of people into this country.
Jim, that is one of the most outrageous, insulting, ignorant, and foolish things you've ever said, and for you that's still a really... The notion that you think that this is a racist bill is so wrong and so insulting. Jim, the reality is that the foreign-born population...
And it has no... American community now. You brought it up again. You said you wanted to have a conversation and not target. Is it going to be a target?
This is what we want to do.
The African American community, are you going to target? I'm not trying to be funny.
Right, and I know what you're saying. What you're saying is 100% correct. We want to help unemployed African Americans in this country and unemployed workers of all backgrounds get jobs. And insinuations like Jim made, trying to ascribe nefarious motives to a compassionate immigration measure designed to help newcomers and current arrivals alike, is wrong. And this is a positive, optimistic proposal that says 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, we want to have an immigration system that takes care of the people who are coming here and the people who are already living here by having standards, by having a real clear requirement that you be able to support yourself financially, by making sure that employers can pay a living wage. And that's the right policy for our country, and it's the President's commitment to taking care of American workers. I apologize, Jim, if things got heated, but you did make some pretty rough insinuations. So thank you, and I'll hand it over to Sarah.
Oh, and some nasty stuff in there. There needs to be a bite almost. Holyfield is very unhappy. Look at this. It looked as if Tyson bared his teeth at one stage in the exchange.
Yes, I think he bit his ear. That's what Holyfield was in a lot of pain from that. You see the blood on the ear. That was definitely a bite.
All right, so because the Trump administration has changed the version of this infamous meeting, Wolf Blitzer wants to know, does that constitute obstruction of justice?
There's a growing compendium.
Richard Benvenisti is the person speaking. He was special prosecutor during the Watergate years.
Of misstatements that are consistent with the idea that there is something to hide about the Russia relationship with Mr. Trump and his closest associates. Was this simply one more misstatement trying to obscure the true facts that eventually are beginning to come out?
Is the statement alone, though, the discrepancy, potentially obstruction of justice?
Is that statement alone obstruction of justice? The fact that they keep shifting? Is that in and of itself perhaps obstruction of justice?
Potentially obstruction of justice?
I don't think so.
Oh.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Well.
The statement wasn't repeated under oath as originally drafted.
Oh.
It has come out as several other things, beginning with the rationale for firing Mr. Comey. Remember, the White House came out with a variety of different reasons for it, all of which were quickly negated by Mr. Trump himself in an interview with NBC.
So therefore, he ought to be impeached, right?
Where he said, I was uncomfortable about the Russia investigation. I fired the FBI director. Similarly, Sarah Huckabee Sanders now hits the president's lawyer with a mallet right between the eyes. It's kind of contradicted what he has just said as recently as last night.
So therefore, he ought to be impeached, right? Greg Jarrett is one of the lawyers for Fox News. And Comey and Mueller are goombas. He says that's the very definition of a disqualifying conflict of interest.
It essentially means that if you have a personal relationship with somebody substantially involved in the case, you shall not serve as special counsel. It goes on to explain what a personal relationship is. It's a friendship that normally is viewed as likely to induce partiality. Well, Sean, you might as well put a picture of Mueller and Comey together next to the statute. They're the definition of a disqualifying conflict of interest. And Congressman Franks on the Judiciary Committee is calling for Mueller to resign. I spoke to him a short time ago, Congressman Franks, and he said there are other members of the Judiciary Committee who feel the same way, and the congressman is vowing now an official lobbying effort to convince others to come out and call for the resignation of Robert Mueller.
But Trump weighed in. Trump had to do with the Donald Jr. statement after his lawyer said that Trump had nothing to do with the statement, Kellyanne Conway.
The president said that he weighed in the way any father would on the statement. He wasn't part of the email chain. He wasn't part of the meeting, certainly. We all know that nothing came of the meeting. There was no follow-up. There was no attempt to collude. Jared Kushner last week, I thought, did a masterful job of making a statement and certainly sharing what he knew behind closed doors with the relevant committees in the House and Senate, Brett. And the gravamen of that is he had texted an assistant and said, this meeting is basically worthless. Can you find a way to get me out? And so I know that Russia, as a coverage, has been lessening over the last week because I think people understand there's no evidence of collusion. We were promised Watergate. We got ordered nothing. And in addition, you now see the big Russia stories, if any, are this Fusion GPS getting money from the Russian government to assemble some phony dossier to try to hurt candidate Trump. That, I think, will continue to be investigated and should. When we think of Russia around here, we think of Hillary Clinton giving up 20% of the uranium rights, Bill Clinton get $500,000 in speaking fees. And one last thing. I think Bloomberg did a great job a couple weeks ago. Wall Street Journal followed up in a story. 6% of Americans said Russia is the most important issue to them and their families. 75% of the coverage had been about Russia. There's a huge disconnect between what people say is important and what they're being told is important.
And we come back to Jake Tapper, the man who would be a journalist, once again, his hat back on as a pundit. Shouldn't we expect a much higher standard of truth from the White House, he says? Eric Trump says, I want somebody to start fighting for my father. And I don't blame him. Why aren't the Republicans bringing up the fact that there was no special prosecutor for Chinagate? There was no special prosecutor for Fast and Furious, no prosecutor for Lois Lerner and her denial of the applications filed by these conservative tax-exempt organizations. No special counsel for the Clinton Foundation pay-to-play. No special counsel for Espionage Act. Is this thing on? I don't think this thing is on. 888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. And Joseph in Colorado, how can we affect the globe regarding climate change? It's arrogant thinking. Jeff, Delaware, immigration, welfare society is unsustainable. Gentlemen, please do not leave town. I am Larry Elder.
Larry will be right back. Stay tuned.
Oh, hi, Larry. As a Republican, we've lost the notion of being a political party of family values. We've lost that. Now we're going to lose the moniker of being conservative. After hiring 15,000 H-2B visa workers to come in, Department of Homeland Security, Mr. Kelly, he said, oh, there's not enough Americans to fill that void. Right. What a bunch of liars. Thank you.
Traditional values kind of arguments and strong foreign policy, all that's over.
888-971-SAGE, 35 years after President Reagan crushed the Air Traffic Controllers Union for calling an illegal strike. Big labor and the big airlines have their eyes on recapturing the air traffic control system. They're unwitting allies, Republicans on Capitol Hill, who want to spin off air traffic control to a federally funded independent nonprofit corporation, a process they call privatization, but really is that in name only. You see, the big airlines and the union stand to gain $20 billion in giveaways. Normally, I am in favor of privatization, but their plan hands over decisions about infrastructure funding, taxes, fees, and consumer complaints to a board dominated by commercial airlines. All this is bad news. The new plan will raise ticket prices, make travel less safe. Supporters say the plan will reduce flight times and delays, but that simply isn't the case. The DOT data shows that our air traffic control system is not the primary cause of airline flight delays. Airline scheduling practices are, and this proposal simply gives more power to the big unions. Help stop this privatization plan in name only. Go to aviationacrossamerica.org to learn more. That's aviationamerica.org. Or go to larryelder.com and look for Aviation Across America banner. Aviationacrossamerica.org. That's aviationacrossamerica.org. Joseph is in Lyman, Colorado. Joseph, you're on the Larry Elder Show. Thank you so much for calling. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time, Larry. I'm a truck driver, and, I'm in Colorado. This time last month, snow-capped mountain, Colorado. But I was curious, like my grandma said, if good Lord willing, the sun will come up tomorrow. But then scientifically behind that, I learned that the Earth, in order for the sun to come up tomorrow, the Earth is spinning on its axis 1,000 miles an hour. For the sun to set right now here in Colorado and set again tomorrow in 24 hours, the Earth has to be spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. Now, if you add to that, in order for this to be August 2nd, 2018, the Earth is on a trajectory around the sun at 6,000 miles an hour. So we're spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, going through the atmosphere at 6,000 miles an hour, while I'm holding my semi steady at 65 miles an hour between the lines here in Colorado. How in the world could my wife use an aerosol hairspray or non-aerosol hairspray affect climate change, affect anything? That's just my curiosity.
Well, Joseph, I have a response to you. That's my response. The answer is it can't. Jerry Brown, our governor, even admitted that if California adopted all of the climate change measures that it wants, it wouldn't make one iota of difference in the climate of the world. But he says we need to take the lead. We need to inspire others. And if others are inspired, even though our economy is worse off, even though people have fewer jobs, even though we have less prosperity, then they'll be inspired to do the same thing and have less prosperity too. Thank you very much for the call. I appreciate it. Jeff is in Delaware, Ohio. Jeff, you're on the Larry Elder Show.
Larry, can you hear me okay?
I hear you fine.
Yeah, Larry. I'm retired Army Special Forces, retired registered nurse. My wife's from overseas. As far as immigration, no modern welfare society can support unlimited immigration. When we talk about, well, my grandfather come here, he may or may not have been illegal or whatever, but it was different then. They sank or swim. They didn't cost us a penny. And then also the liberals, they say people don't want the jobs that illegals take. Well, that's a lie, too. These people are mechanics, I'm talking the illegals. 97% of them are working what we call the trades. They're tree trimmers, they're carpenters, they're masons. I live in central Ohio. And these people are painters. They come around and knock on your door. Hey, we'll take the tree down. To say that people don't want those jobs is just flat out lie. I mean, 97% of these jobs are good jobs, well-paying jobs.
Jeff, as you probably know, when I was growing up, my father cleaned toilets for a living. Somehow, some way, this man born and raised in America took that job, a job that people now say Americans won't do because illegal aliens will do it instead. How is it that my dad ended up doing that job and a second full-time job, also cleaning toilets with another bread company, if in fact Americans won't do that kind of work?
Yes, and also they've weaponized immigration, the liberals have. As soon as people start immigrating over here, they start telling them the white folks hate them, and if they don't vote Democrat, then, the white people's going to throw them back out and stuff. I'm talking legal immigrants now.
Right. I like the way you put it, weaponize them. They create the mindset that makes them become Democrats. Eric Trump says, I want somebody to start fighting for my dad.
You would think they would get on the bandwagon of what you have a stock market that's 100 points off of a record. 22,000 is already a record. It broke another record today. He's broken 30 records in the last 3-4 months. I mean, it's just skyrocketing. You look at oil prices and how good that is, right? For this, you look at infrastructure, all the pipelines and things that are going in. You look at the military, what he's doing. You look at the VA and what he's doing. I mean, tax reform, which he obviously wants to get done, which would be incredible for this country. You look at consumer confidence. You look at, building in America. I mean, so many incredible things that are being done, and all they want to focus on is Russia and the scandal. And I guarantee you, if you watch the mainstream media, the only thing that they're going to talk about is Anthony for the next 2 weeks,
4 days,
whatever it is. But they won't talk about the stock market. They won't talk about people's 401ks. They won't talk about the
regulation
economy.
Gone, the promises kept.
I mean, it's
everything
amazing.
that's happened.
This country's $4 trillion richer. $4 trillion richer under my father in the first 6 months.
I'm disappointed.
Where is that?
But the Republicans are not only... They all ran on repeal and replace, Eric. Your father, as he said, you guys have made this promise now for 7 years. I have a pen in hand. I'm ready to sign it. And the things that your father made, promises on the campaign trail, he's kept. But not only that, they've allowed this phony Russia narrative to go out for so long. But yet we've got Ukraine collusion, we got Uranium One, we got the email server scandal, which we know laws were broken. You got Comey leaking. The general counsel, we learned, of the FBI last week is leaking. Loretta Lynch, they're not even using the power of subpoena to investigate what I truly see as real evidence, real crimes.
When we come back, Pew Research Center, interesting percentage of Democrats who believe that the Democratic Party, quote, too often sees government as the only way to solve problems. What percentage of Democrats said that about their own party? We're talking about that. 888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. Larry Elder here.
Call in now and join the conversation. 888-971-SAGE. That's 888-971-7243. Setting fire to the airwaves. It's the Larry Elder Show.
Well, of course, Nancy Pelosi said you have to pass the bill before you read it, because she's exempt. So she didn't give a crap what was in it, right? It was just like government insurance for the lowlifes as far as she's concerned. What about now, though? They're still putting that caveat in there, that they're exempt. That is outrageous. That cannot stand. These Congress people are spoiled, and they don't work for us anymore. Right and left, they're working for the deep state. They're working with the globalists. They've been bribed. They've been cajoled. They've been everything you can think of. You know, it's time for pitchforks and torches. This is an outrage that very few people are controlling the mass of Americans who are hardworking and deserve good health care.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
888-971-SAGE. Now, you sent a message to the media and the political elites last fall, loud and clear. You wanted new leadership that focuses on the middle class, not on the political class, on your lives, not on theirs. The media elites did not get the message. That's why they've been working nonstop since Election Day to undo your vote. Their goal is clear. Delegitimize your candidates and the issues you care about and set up Democratic victories in 2018 and beyond. This summer, Democratic activists will, with the media's help, plan on overwhelming the town halls of our congressmen and senators. That cannot happen. You can stop it by showing up and being heard. That's why I'm urging you to go to stopignoringmyvoice.com right now and find out what you can do. Don't let the mainstream media and the Dems steal your voice or our town halls. Go to stopignoringmyvoice.com right now and find out how you can be heard. That's stopignoringmyvoice.com. Recall what Donald Trump said to the police, don't be so nice to thugs.
I have a simple message today for every gang member and criminal alien that are threatening so violently our people. We will find you, we will arrest you, we will jail you, and we will deport you. But we need more resources from Congress, and we're getting them. Congress is actually opening up and really doing a job. They should have approved health care last night, but you can't have everything. Boy, oh boy. They've been working on that one for 7 years. Can you believe that? The swamp. But we'll get it done. We're going to get it done. You know, I said from the beginning, let Obamacare implode and then do it. And when you see these towns and when you see these thugs being thrown into the back of a paddy wagon, you just see them thrown in, rough. I said, please don't be too nice. Like when you guys put somebody in the car and you're protecting their head, you know, the way you put their hand over. Like, don't hit their head, and they've just killed somebody, don't hit their head. I said, you can take the hand away, okay?
And Trump got hammered. Here's what an Oakland police officer said about what it's like to be a cop in one of our nation's most violent cities.
Anybody that tells you that they haven't been scared, I'm under the full impression that they're a total liar. It's there, and you're human. You're not a robot. You actually have emotions. We train you and put you in realistic predicaments. How do I make sure that my finger's not on the trigger, but my finger's indexed? How do I function on talking to the radio while keeping an eye on unknown threats? Many times I've given a direct order or a lawful order, and it's been met with F you, or it's been met with, come on, let's fight. For me, I've never been in that situation where I've actually had to pull the trigger. Every time you see something on TV, it's a clip of an officer with a gun. And what tends to happen is the community thinks that every call an officer goes to, they're using their gun. That's not the case. In Oakland, we work in one of the most violent cities in North America. When we see videos that are definitely disturbing, it hits home. When you see it as a citizen and it shocks your conscience, a lot of times when I see the same footage or we see the same footage, it shocks our conscience as well. Then we want answers. My heart sank when I've seen everything that I've seen over the last couple of months, couple of years. Seeing the response to different riots and different violent protests that go wrong, it's heartbreaking because I see both sides. I see the officers out there who are probably on a 24-hour day, and people don't know that. And then
By the way, does he sound like a Nazi, a fascist?
I understand the other end, where people are frustrated. They've seen different things that there's definitely some questions that need to be answered, and they're angry. Sometimes you have to give the people a voice, and that maybe their anger isn't necessarily towards you, and maybe toward another contact that they had with another police officer 10 years ago. It's tough for African-American community when dealing with the police. I personally have been pulled over multiple times as a police officer. I actually was arrested in high school for doing something I didn't do. Why would I want to impose that feeling on you? Because I was mad. I was angry. I was disappointed. I wanted revenge. There's a difference between getting into police work for the right reasons and the wrong reasons. The wrong reasons be, I don't like people. I don't like talking to people. The wrong reason be, well, I want to feel, what makes me feel bigger and badder and tougher to get into this business, to help out the community, to serve the community, to be a servant. I know my circle of influence is very small, but it starts with me.
Sounds like a Nazi to me, doesn't he?
Larry will be right back. Stay tuned.
But you can't forget from sundown to sunset.
And when you see these towns, and when you see these thugs being thrown into the back of a paddy wagon, you just see them thrown in, rough. I said, please don't be too nice. Like when you guys put somebody in the car and you're protecting their head, you know, the way you put their hand up. Like, don't hit their head, and they've just killed somebody, don't hit their head.
888-971-SHGE, 888-971-7243. We're in our third day of my campaign to help our friends at Food for the Poor, to help starving children in drought-stricken Haiti. Angel Aloma, whom I met when I was in Guatemala, is executive director of Food for the Poor. He is a force of nature, compassionate, energetic. He truly cares. Just came back from Haiti where he had an especially touching encounter.
You know, I went into a little shack. There was a child eating a little bowl of rice. His 7-year-old brother, the child eating was 4. The 7-year-old brother is standing there looking very sad. I asked him in Creole, why aren't you eating? And he said, today it's not my turn to eat. If we can only imagine the pain of a parent having to tell their child, I can't feed you today, maybe tomorrow, or a grandparent, as is the case many times, it has to be horrendous. That seems like something that should just not be happening.
And you can help us help Food for the Poor right now. Just $50 will give one starving child in Haiti food for a year and water for life. Your one-time gift of $100 will give the same blessing to 2 needy children. Just call toll-free 855-918-4673. That's 855-918-HOPE. Or you can go to LarryElder.com and click on the Food for the Poor banner. 855-918-HOPE, 855-918-4673. This is why there is paralysis in Washington, D.C. And it isn't because the politicians are crooks. It isn't because the politicians are stupid. It's because the American people are sending inconsistent signals. For example, nearly 2/3 of people, according to a recent Pew Research poll, 2/3 say Republican Party, quote, is too willing to cut government programs even when they work. 61% say the Democratic Party, quote, too often sees government as the only way to solve problems. 44% of Democrats and Democrat leaners say their party, quote, too often sees government as a solution. A third of Republican leaners say the Republican Party is, quote, too willing to cut government programs even when they work, close quote. So now what do you do with that? What do you do with that? Republicans saying that Republican Party is too willing to cut programs, quote, even when they work, close quote. Is it relevant that the programs work, or is it relevant that the federal government ought not be doing it? That's the question. 44% of Democrats say their party too often sees government as a solution. Really? Yet if you went to a Democrat and said, let's privatize Social Security, are you kidding me? Let's go to health savings account with regard to Medicare. Are you smoking something? This is the problem. You get these inconsistent signals. Yeah, we want free markets. On the other hand, I don't like the idea that my insurance company is rejecting people with pre-existing illnesses. So then you don't want a free market. Well, I want to compel an insurance company to take on people with pre-existing illnesses. Well, you realize then, therefore, you have redefined insurance. Insurance is about preparing yourself for what may happen but has not yet happened, as opposed to preparing yourself for something that's already happened. And when you are forcing an insurance company to take on people with pre-existing illnesses, you're forcing them to take on people where something has already happened, which completely obliterates the whole concept of insurance. Forcing an insurance carrier to take on people whose parents want them on their insurance form until they're 26 years old, forcing them to do it is kind of inconsistent with the very definition of, free markets. And when you hear people say the idea is to get the cost down, and then here's my government plan for doing that, run for the exit. Government can't get costs down. The private sector can get costs down. The private sector can improve quality. The private sector can improve accessibility. Remember the debate I had with, or the interview I had with Dennis Kucinich, where I asked him to give me the constitutional basis for universal health care, for single payer. And he said, well, the general welfare clause. Please. James Madison wrote the Constitution. He's called the father of the Constitution. And in 1792, the father of the Constitution was not happy because Congress appropriated $15,000 to assist French refugees. Here's what he said, and I quote, I cannot undertake to lay my finger on that article of the Constitution which granted a right to Congress of expending on objects of benevolence the money of their constituents, close quote. Regarding Dennis Kucinich's assertion that the authority is under the General Welfare Clause, Madison specifically talked about that. Quote, with respect to the words general welfare, I have always regarded them as qualified by the detail of powers enumerated in the Constitution connected with them, close quote. In other words, Article 1, Section 8, that sets forth the 18 specific things that the federal government can do. And welfare is not there. FEMA is not there. Health care is not there. Our 14th president, Franklin Pierce, took action that a lot of people would call crazy today. In 1854, he vetoed a bill to help the mentally ill. You know what he said? Quote, I cannot find any authority in the Constitution for public charity, close quote. James Monroe, let's go back a little bit, the 5th president, had cast one veto in his presidency, and it was a veto against using money to expand the Cumberland Road, even though the road would go through his home state of Virginia and would undoubtedly benefit him economically. He said, there's nothing in the Constitution that allows me to spend money on something like this just because it generates money for my state. Can't do it. It's not in there. President Grover Cleveland, 1887, vetoed an appropriation to help drought-stricken counties in Texas. Same thing. There's nothing in the Constitution that allows charity. We've gotten so far from that, it blows my mind. 888-971-SHGE, 888-971-7243.
You are a vigorous debater. You're listening to The Larry Elder Show.
Hi, Larry. Just wondering if you give us updates on how they're treating that Muslim guy from Somalia and killed that Australian woman in her nightgown. And the shooter should be charged with capital murder. Thanks a lot. Bye.
888-971-SHGE, 888-971-7243. As far as I know, charges have not yet been brought, but we'll be on top of that. MyPillow has created 25 million lovers of MyPillow. Here's your chance to join them. Take advantage of Mike's 4-pack special. 50% off 2 MyPillow premium pillows and 2 Go Anywhere pillows. Just go to MyPillow.com or call 800-890-1843 right now. Make sure you use the promo code Larry. That's 800-890-1843 right now. Use the promo code Larry or go to MyPillow.com. A top Palestinian official needs a life-saving transplant. He's the chief Palestinian negotiator, Secretary General of the Palestine Liberation Organization, suffering from pulmonary fibrosis. He is the chief Israel adversary at the negotiating table. And now guess what? Guess where he's turning to get the life-saving lung transplant? Israel.
Let's not be melodramatic.
Hold up.
Now, if this were the other way around, the chief negotiator of Israel needed to have a lung transplant, and the only place they could get it done is through a Muslim doctor. What do you think would happen?
What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Is the movie Dunkirk really being criticized for having a too male-centric cast? Are you kidding me? One reviewer, Marie-Claire's Mahara Bonner, said, quote, Dunkirk, the movie, felt like an excuse for men to celebrate maleness, which apparently they don't get to do enough, close quote. It is about World War II, and the soldiers during that war tended to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Forgotten man. It's the term. What's the term? It's a yeah.